Good morning, my dear children. This is P. Vasantakumar, social teacher from DAV High School, SDSTPS, AP Genco, Naltur. My dear children, today we are going to learn new chapter, Tanks and Groundwater, Part 1. Learning objectives of this lesson. By the end of the chapter, you will be able to explain about tanks and the usage of tanks. Describe the decline of tanks in our times. Now let's start with introduction. My dear children, we all know that water is a resource without which life doesn't exist. We also know that water on earth is stored in various forms like oceans, rivers, ponds, lakes, streams, dams, tanks, wells, etc. But how tanks or cheruvulu are built and how do they help us? What is the importance and use of groundwater? How is groundwater recharged? Now let us learn about tanks, their uses and the decline of tanks. And let us learn about groundwater, recharging groundwater and the quality and use of groundwater. Now let us learn tanks or cheruvulu in detail. In India, the oldest source of water for irrigation is tanks. In South India, there was a tradition of building tanks beside temples. In Telugu states, these tanks are called cheruvulu or pushkarini, whereas Kovil Kulam in Tamil Nadu and Kulam in Kerala. The use of tanks was started thousands of years ago by our ancestors. They built tanks to store the runoff rainwater. The tanks were built and used for agriculture during the times of megaliths. In Telangana and Rayalaseema, many tanks were built for agriculture by the kings of Kakatiya and Vijayanagara. Even now, many of the villages in these areas have at least one or two major tanks. Now let us learn how are the tanks built at the time. The process of building tanks includes construction of a strong wall of stones and mud around a small stream. It is done by constructing only one wall on one side of a large lake. In villages, sometimes the tanks were built by different people like kings, military leaders, or nayakas, or villagers themselves. In the villages, everyone contributed both physically and economically in the construction of tank. The villagers together conserved the tank by repairing the tank bund, that is a wall, removing silt from the tank bed. They used to take care of the tanks very well in order to check the proper use of water from the tank. The villagers even appointed a person called Nirati or Nirukatte Manishi. As a mark of respect for the people who are responsible for the tanks, the people of the villages preserved their memories in the form of stories, temples, festivals, etc. Now let us learn how did the tanks help us. The uses of tanks are many. Some of them are they provide drinking water for the villagers and their cattle, water for irrigation even at times of severe drought. With the construction of tanks, the water level in the nearby wells also increased. Tank beds can be used for raising crops even if there are no rains or if there is decrease in the tank water level. Most important thing is that the tanks also help in the control of soil erosion, prevention of rainwater runoff. Every year, people would collect tank silt and apply to their fields to fertilize the soil. Thus, my dear children, we should remember that the tanks are not for one person or doesn't benefit one person, but for all the people of a village. Now let us learn decline of tanks in our times. The use and the importance of tanks have been reduced from the past 20 to 30 years. The tanks were neglected and the repairs to the tanks, desilting, etc., were not carried out properly. The tank land has been taken away by the people for agriculture as well as for constructing houses. Moreover, people have been digging deeper and deeper tube wells at higher cost, which helps only a few and degrade the water resources, whereas tanks build resources for all. Next session, we will know the importance and use of groundwater, describe rocks and groundwater in Andhra Pradesh. Thank you, my dear children.